Hey guys, welcome to my workshop. Today I'm making a couple of different slings and I wanted to walk you guys through the process of what I do to make a 2-point sling and a single-point sling, which are the two basic variations that I make. Within those variations are multiple different combinations of connection points, but basically what I do is a 2-point sling and a single-point sling, and that includes the PDW sling. The PDW sling is a modified version of the 2-point sling. The bungee's shorter. I'll get to that. The webbing I use comes from a company called Murdoch Webbing Company. This is a US-based company that has been making webbing for generations. They were one of the companies that was making the webbing that was being used for the military soldier belts, for the shoulder straps, for all kinds of different things, for vehicles, blah blah blah. This stuff is 4,000-pound webbing that they make, and this is the type of stuff that is used for when you're getting ready to launch a vehicle out of an aircraft. This is 4,000-pound tubular webbing. This is a brand new roll, and I've got to be very careful because when it's a brand new roll, there are needles all in it. So I got to make sure I don't run into any of them on camera. That would be all kinds of fun, wouldn't it? Okay, first thing I do is I do that measurement right there. Now I know someone's going to go, wait, you mean you don't have like a standard measurement? No. Everything I do is done by feel. Guys, I've said this before, I make webbing, I make slings by hand. None of what I make is mass produced. Everything is small batch in nature, and high quality is my standard. The reason I chose to stick with Murdoch Webbing Company was that when I looked at different webbing out there, I found that this particular webbing had it felt different. I've tried many different slings from many different manufacturers over the years, and some of the stuff is US based, some of the stuff is overseas, which basically means China. And the webbing that I have found to be the best is the tubular webbing from Murdoch. This stuff is, actually hang on, let me show you something. This stuff is amazingly abrasion resistant. This is, I believe, the original. I think I've got one of the other originals back here. But this is probably number 2. The number 2 meaning the second one ever produced of the Tier 1 Citizen 1-point sling. In fact, my friend Daniel Basham made this one for me years ago before I took over making the slings. But yeah, this is one of his. And this thing is 100% functional. You can see just a little bit of wear here on the webbing, but the remainder of the webbing is absolutely 100% intact. And guys, to date, I've been to 83 firearms training classes. I can't remember how many of those are rifle related, but the vast majority of them, I believe the vast majority of them are rifle. Also, that doesn't count any of the daily training that I was doing, and back when I had my own range, I was shooting quite literally every day. Most afternoons I would shoot. Sometimes it'd only be 20 rounds, but I was consistently shooting every afternoon. I keep this sling around. It's not used anymore, primarily because I use 2-point slings across the board now. This is my go-to rifle, and you can see it's a 2-point sling that I've chosen to use. The other reason is that I try not to use the Magpul quick detach anymore because it's got the little button on the back, and when the little button on the back comes in contact with your buttstock, and I'll just show you here on this rifle. When your buttstock is collapsed and your sling is on load, so I'll just put it around my neck. Oh, there we go. The stock just enough depresses that little button, because here it is just hooked in. It won't drop the rifle. The second you collapse the stock, it's making contact with the button. Put a little tension and it cuts off the weapon. And I realized that the hard way, one time too many. And so how's that go? what's the definition of insanity? I think it is. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, that's why I went to the Bravo Company Manufacturing Quick Detach. These are made in America, and this is how I buy them. Hundreds and hundreds of these at a time. And when you consider what these things cost, you can imagine what hundreds and hundreds of them cost for me, even at my dealer cost, which is over $10 a piece. Okay, so don't think that I'm getting these for $2 a piece. I'm paying well over $10 a piece for these. And I buy them hundreds at a time. Yeah, do the math. These have a fence on them, and that fence protects, let's imagine that this is a 2-point, and that fence protects the stock from ever making contact. Notice how it doesn't allow it to lock down to its final position. So even when it bumps up against the QD, it can't activate the QD, and the QD is always hooked into the rifle and won't cut loose. So when I went to these, the disconnection issue that I was having with my single point slings instantly went away. So the point I'm getting at is this: I've consistently learned from what works and what doesn't from training. I'm not one of those guys who makes something but doesn't put the work in. I put the work in for you guys. But anyways, let's make some slings today. I'm making OD, and I've got to cut some coyote for you guys. But we'll jump on the slings. Okay guys, the first sling that I'm going to make here is actually going to be the 1-point sling. I've got the name of the customer covered. 1-point sling, coyote, 550 para sling. This is actually a better sling to make because a lot of people misunderstand the use of the para sling and why it's such a handy thing to have. But let's get that done first, and then I'll walk you guys through the process of the why behind that sling. Alright, I've got a piece of rubber matting that I use. This has a very specific measurement to it, and I've also got a hole in the middle, so some of what I do has a full length and then a partial length of measurement. Just like the webbing I use, the buckles I use are from a company called Duralast, and this is a buckle known as the Mojave. This is a buckle that's made out of acetal, which is, by what I understand, the same material that bowling balls are made from. This stuff is tough. I've never broken one of these, and I've intentionally tried. They will actually disengage long before you get a chance to break one. My HK hooks are from Blue Force Gear. So, like I mentioned before, my QDs are from Bravo Company Manufacturing, and my HK hooks are from Blue Force Gear. Both of these are manufactured in the US, so there's the HK hook, there's the Quick Detach. My Tri-Glides are also Duralast. I believe they're made in New York. I'm Eppingham, New York, I'm not really sure, but yeah. And even my rubber bands are actually US made. And then I've got some scissors. No, these come from Japan, so sorry to tell you, but my Bic lighters are US made. And then my, my Speedy Stitcher. And I actually run the entire spool of thread. This stuff comes from Indiana. And I run the entire spool of thread right through the bottom of it, so you guys are always going to have contiguous unbroken stitches in your slings, so that stuff doesn't come loose easily. So anyways, what we're going to do is make a 1-point sling, because the 550 para sling is a great sling to demonstrate the why behind the design of what it is that I do. My paracord, yes, is also US made. If I haven't said this before, and I know I have, everything that I use and everything that I purchase is US made. If it is not US made, I have to have a darn good reason why I'm using it. And thus far, I've been lucky enough to be able to find US produced everything for what I do. Alright, once the end of the paracord is melted, I allow this to cool, and then the ends of it are going to be mated up together like this, and then stitched through. And the way the parasling works is this portion goes around the buffer tube of your AR-15, it wraps around and the sling passes through, and it creates the old school girth hitch. I'll show this to you guys in just a minute. The reason I'm doing this video is because every once in a while I need to remind the industry that there are still guys that do old school hand production, and I'm one of them. And when you order a sling, this is an actual customer's order, and when you, in fact, Ian Morris, this is your sling. When you guys order a sling from me, you're getting a handmade product that was not made in advance. That is to say that I do not mass produce anything. When I get an order, I am making something bespoke for the customer, and you're always going to have, every time, it's going to be one-off quality each and every time. And some may think, no, you know, the price point is ultimately what really drives me. And for those of you that are price point driven, well, Amazon has all kinds of crap for you to buy. Go right ahead. But if you're looking for top quality, handmade, small batch produced items, then guys like me are going to be your best bet. Each and every one of these stitches is a lock stitch. So basically the needle goes through the paracord, the thread passes back through the loop, and then you pull, and then pull the thread partially through. You notice how the thread went like that? That locks the stitch actually inside of this space right here. It's creating a locked up stitch that is really going to be a nightmare if you ever want to try to take it apart. The reason I know my slings are a nightmare to take apart is every once in a while I have to cut one apart because I've either made a mistake on it, or I'm testing something. I'm doing like load testing. I used to do a lot more of this years ago when I was doing like really hardcore testing, and I was doing stuff like hanging heavy loads from tree limbs. The heavy load was me, by the way. To prove the point to a friend, I actually hooked one of my single point slings to a tree limb and then hung on to the thing. And back then I was much bigger than I am now, and all 300 plus pounds of me hung from that from that sling. The tree started like swaying, but the buckle never let loose, the sling never broke, not a single stitch ever popped, and it proved the point that handmade quality really does matter. This sucker, you will never ever, you'll never get this to come apart. That's it. That's permanent. For your entire lifetime, that paracord loop is never coming apart. Alright, next thing is length of webbing. I'm going to be making a couple of 2-point slings today too. Because I'm doing this on camera, I'm slightly out of sequence on things, but it's alright. And now I'm not giving you guys specific measurements for a reason. While I don't have a problem showing you how I make my slings, I'm not going to be dumb enough to put exact measurements to everything. I also wanted to show you that the nature of what I do, because it's handmade production, you'll notice that I'm basically just doing this for the measurements. So I have roughly a repeatable measurement. I'll just compare these two to each other. So look, so this one here on the right is just a skosh longer than the one on the left. Big deal. It's neither here nor there. The reason I add that extra little length is for the sewing process. I want to make sure that I have a generous amount of bungee for the sewing process to make sure that I have the room that I need to work with. Okay, so these 2 points are, actually I'll show you how we do this. This is Bungee brand bungee, and this stuff is made in the US, and to make sure that it doesn't unravel, because you see it's got a fabric coating on it, so to make sure that it doesn't unravel, I run it through the flame, and then I run it across my index finger and thumb, and it seals that mesh. Roll it, yeah it's hot, yeah it hurts, but yeah I'm quite used to it. After years of doing this, I'm very used to this. So once again, you guys are getting a chance to see that what I do is not being made by some sewing shop where a bunch of illegal aliens are zipping stuff through a machine. By the way, that's another point right there. In some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, US made, guys, you're still dealing with stuff that's being made by people that are not Americans. So you might be making something that was produced in America, but it's being produced with bottom of the barrel labor. Sorry to have to tell you, but it's the truth. Alright, single point sling. Got a couple of dowel rods here. I've got this one, which I'm not going to tell you how long it is, and I got this one, same thing. 2 point, single point. And then if you're doing dog leash, it's actually both of these together. Also for the PDW sling, it's both of these together. What I do is I take the bungee, insert it into the webbing, and then I seat it to that depth right there. I pinch down here, the webbing, I'm sorry, the bungee is here, the dowel rod is here, and I pinch upward so that the bungee never moves any deeper and I can get the dowel rod out. Then I take my water bottle, put it here, take my propane torch, put it there. It keeps the webbing on the table for me. And the webbing that I use has what I call a lay line. It's 3 lines down the middle, 3 lines of fabric down the middle. And I use those as lay lines or stitching lines. And I start the line of stitching. You notice the amount of force that it took to drive that through the bungee, because the bungee is fairly stout. You pull just enough out so you can work with it, and then I run it up the needle like this, put it back on the table, press down on the rubber, pull the needle out, trap the bungee, drive the needle back through, take the thread, pass it back through. So now, lock stitch. And then pull it back through. You notice how the thread goes like that, because I've now locked that stitch actually inside, it's sandwiched inside the webbing and the bungee. And I played around with this. There was a certain measurement, a certain length from the edge of the bungee that I needed to maintain. There was a certain amount of stitching that I needed to create. And I reached a point where I kind of found an equation that just worked. And I've stuck with it over these years. Alright, now what I do is soften the webbing so I can scrunch it up. Notice how it automatically wants to take that wrinkle. But there's a prescribed amount of these that I actually do. Alright, so once I reach that prescribed amount, I then trap the sling on the table and then find the edge of it by touching it with my middle finger on the left hand, place the needle just inside, and then go right through the bungee again and trap it. And start the entire process over again. What I'm doing here is I'm pushing forward so that this reaches the edge of the needle, so that when I invert it on the table, it's already making contact with the rubber. I drive the bungee down with my thumb and index finger of the right hand. I pull up on the needle to disengage it, move it over just a little bit, drive it back through again. And when you do this, yeah, you got to be careful, otherwise you'll end up passing the needle through your finger. By the grace of God, I have not done that yet. Yeah, truth is, I've been doing this long enough that I really don't have any errors anymore. Every once in a while I might catch the tip of my finger on the needle, but because I wear gloves, it normally catches the glove before it actually gets to me, and this is rubberized, so it usually catches the needle in the rubber and reminds me to back off. Alright, now before I go to the next step, I take the scrunched up area, I pull it down, and then when I go like this, it sets it in place. And I'm also testing the stitching on the bungee to make sure that it isn't going to let loose. And what I've just done there, I've maxed this sucker out all the way. If you actually get to here with your sling, you're having a bad day. If you get to here, something has gone horrifically wrong. But typically speaking, this sling will hold the weight of the rifle with just about that much stretch. So this is a shock absorber, and this is eating up the weight of that rifle from beating you on your shoulder, because even a lightweight rifle like a 13.7, these are in the roughly the 6-pound range, this will still abuse you if you have it on your person for too long. Alright, next step is this goes over my neck, and I place it on the table, and we're doing a 550 pair sling. Alright, the next step is the ends of the webbing have to be melted. What I do for this is I use a Corel bowl, I place it on the tabletop, and this is the other bowl I'm going to use. This is going to show you guys just how flame resistant this webbing actually is. Watch how long I've got to keep it in the flame. This is fully enveloped in flame right now. Try that with your Chinesium garbage that you get from Amazon. It'll crinkle up into plastic wrap in no time. So my right hand is pressing down on the bowl and creating force while the end of that webbing cools. Now this side is getting pressed, and now that's flattened out the way I want it, and now I just melt the little hairs back down again and just get it semi-attractive for you guys. Same with this. This way you guys have something to work with when you're running this through a buckle or a tri-glide. This is smooth, and yet it's still rigid enough that you have something to pass through and then grab and pull. So now what I do is I take my abdominal wall and I press the sling against the edge of the table, and I lean hard into it, and I'll take the 550 paracord and I'll place it here. Actually, I'll show it to the camera. I'll place it, this will be under a load, so it's actually stretched just a little bit. I'll place this, and then I will bend it like that. And I'll be creating tension this way, pulling forward on this. And then I'll trap it with this clip so that this angle is a nice clean right angle. And it comes across easier when I'm actually leaning into it. But anyways, what I'm after is a nice clean right angle between these two areas, because this is a portion that hangs down against your abdominal wall. In your rifle, this is what sets my slings apart from pretty much everybody else in the industry. I'm making a bespoke sling. Whether you have paracord loop, whether you have a quick detach, or an HK hook, I'm creating a bespoke sling. There is no dongle. Most slings, when you reach this point on the sling, there's a dongle about this long for you to hook in your 550 paracord, your HK hook, your QD, whatever else you're using. But I actually sew it right into the sling, and the reason for that is this allows you to have your weapon set mid-sternum, so that when you need the weapon, all you're doing is placing your stock to your shoulder, bringing the weapon up, and immediately using it. So this right here is crucial to get correct, and this has to be under tension when I stitch it, so that when you guys are working with it, it's always a nice stiff lock-up area right here. So what I'm doing here is I'm leaning way back so the camera will pick it up, but I'm pushing forward with my belly, and I'm pulling on this paracord, and I'm creating tension right there, and it's locked in place now. So this is actually pre-tensioned, and this is holding it in place, and then it'll be permanently locked in by the stitching that I'm going to run through here now. Someone's going to ask, why do I burn the edge of the thread? It's so that as that cools, it creates a little bulb of nylon that I can now grasp easily with the gloves, and I can pull against it. So that when I'm making my knots, so what you do here is you pull out about this much line, so that when you run your next stitch, you run it back through. When I go to pull this knot tight, it gives me something to hang on to, so that when it reaches the end of the cord, that little blob of nylon on the end of the cord is trapped between my thumbnail and index finger, and it can't possibly slide out of my grasp. So when I do this maneuver to lock that stitch in tight, it doesn't go for a walk. And each stitch I make is a contiguous run of lock stitches, each and every last one. It's never broken. It's never started here, halfway down the middle, I ran out of cord, so I got to tie it off and start over again. No. Each and every one is a lock stitch. And the reason for that is, should you ever actually pop a stitch during the use of the sling, the stitch above and the stitch below is always going to be a lock stitch, because every stitch is a lock stitch. And the stitch, the one pop stitch, is going to have a locked one above, a locked one below, and they're not going to let loose casually. And you'll be able to finish whatever it is you're doing and get that sling back to me, and I'll always take care of you guys. I can't say no questions asked, because frankly I want to know why the thing failed. But when I say that I ask, it isn't like I'm going to start judging you, but if you're doing something dumb, we're going to have a conversation. So I'll be using these for rappelling harnesses. See, many of you have bought these slings and you've never actually watched one being made, so I know this is kind of cool for a lot of people. Guys, I really love doing this, and I really enjoy teaching. And for those who are going to ask, man, why are you showing your secrets? Well, first of all, I'm sewing. Sewing is not a secret. I'm making a sling. Making a sling is not a secret. And if you want to do this for your own, go right ahead. But you have to figure out the measurements that I use, which I'm not going to tell. You have to figure out the number of stitches which I use, which I'm not going to tell. Which, sure, you can figure that out on your own. But you got to buy a sling. And the other thing is, you have to buy all the stuff that I buy in the massive amounts of quantities. I mean, look, I forget how much this is. I forget how many yards of paracord, but this is, in fact, you can actually see it on the spool, USA. So this is US made paracord, and I buy it several hundred feet at a time. I want to say that's a 500-foot spool, but I'm not sure. Webbing I buy usually 3,000 feet at a time, if I remember correctly. It's basically, it's 10 spools of 300 feet each. And then I buy the quick detach and the HK hooks, several hundred at a time. It allows me to produce a really good handmade sling for you guys for the same amount of money that you're spending for a comparable sling from another manufacturer. But this is actually 100% US made, handmade production. And what's really cool is I have customers who have actually bought this sling, and they say, when I got your sling and compared it to the other one I got from Amazon, it was like a night and day. Guys, what it really boils down to in many cases is a lot of us don't know what we don't know. So in many cases, people are buying things in the firearms industry and they don't fully understand what it is that they're buying. And that's where guys like me come in handy, because I'm showing you what it is that I'm using and I'm showing you how I'm making your sling. Somebody asked me why I don't do double rows of stitching. Well, I don't need double rows of stitching. When you're doing hand stitching and each stitch is the lock stitch instead of a bottom thread and a top thread like on a sewing machine, my stitching doesn't come loose. And I've intentionally tested my slings really hard over the years. I've pushed weapons into areas and I've tensioned the slings in ways that aren't normal, because I was curious to see if the sling was going to show somewhere. You know, you start cranking a rifle through a busted window just to see what the webbing will take when it rubs up against the glass, and you come out of that with very little discernible wear on the sling. That's impressive. And that's because I'm using Murdoch & Company webbing. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you guys, Murdoch & Company is one of the companies, as I said earlier, they make the webbing that has been used by the military for years, but one of the things that they also make is arresting, aircraft arresting gear webbing. No, not the stuff on aircraft carriers, the cable, but they do make the nets, the webbing that's used for making the nets to capture an aircraft. They also make the drag lines that you're going to find behind parachutes that are attached to aircraft. So the point I'm getting at is the stuff I'm using is hardcore, seriously heavy-duty, flame-resistant webbing, and yet it is, check this out. Now someone knows what I just did and why I just did that. I'm going to show it again. This webbing is very supple. It's very, very soft. It's not abrasive to the skin. It's a really nice webbing to work with because it is very high quality and it is really well produced. And when I first started using this stuff, I realized that it really was a cut above everything else that I'd ever used before. I find that the product is consistent across the board. Color batches are always consistent, which is really nice. The product is stellar in its quality, and that's why you guys are not able to have certain colors, because Murdoch Webbing Company just doesn't make certain colors. I'd love to do gray. Can't find gray, at least not from them. Recently somebody wanted a neon yellow sling for his daughter's birthday, so I made him two actually. And it was really cool because I ended up buying just enough webbing. In that instance, I ended up buying just enough webbing to get the job done because I didn't want to actually buy 300 feet of the webbing. So I bought roughly 50 feet of this stuff and cranked out a couple of slings for him and his daughter. And they really turned out a lot better than I expected them to, because that neon yellow, boy, that is some bright stuff. That's why I have neon green and neon pink, because at some point in the past somebody asked and I wanted to make sure that I had what I needed to suit the guy's needs. Unfortunately, I ended up with a bunch of neon yellow and a bunch of neon pink. Maybe I should run a sale, I don't know. Alright, this is the last step. Make sure that the webbing is aligned properly. Run it through the buckle, back out to the tri-glide. This right here is why I melt the ends. You guys saw me able to pull that through relatively easily, and then I do that. That's the final step. And this is consistently what I end up with right here. I've done this for so many years, I know that this is pretty much the exact length I'm going to end up with. This right here is why I always tell you guys, this much adjustment allows me to adjust this all the way to a 3X, 4X dude, and I can adjust this all the way down. In fact, I'll show you really quick how to do that. I can adjust this all the way down to that right there is essentially a 98-pound girl. If I needed to, I could run it all the way down to here, and I could fit a guy bigger than me. So these slings are designed to accommodate pretty much anybody. And I go out of my way to make sure that I'm giving you guys quality work, solid workmanship that is permanent. This, unless you flat out have used this, this is never coming apart. This buckle has a roughly 300-pound braking force to get this thing to cut loose, but this is also just the easy way to get out of your weapon. When your weapon is on load, you can just cut it like that. When you're going to put this on a rifle, so let's take this sling out of the way. Alright, what you do is you take whatever your orientation is going to be, left hand or right hand. I set these up initially for right-handed people. If you're a lefty, all you do is pass this over and then rotate the buckle and hook it back in again. Guys, it's not rocket science. Just figure it out. It's not hard. You pass it here, pass the sling through the webbing, and then pull tight and take the paracord and slide it forward, and you want it just forward of this position on the tube right here. You pull it tight. And the reason that this is important is so that when you rack the rifle, the charging handle goes right over the top of that paracord. But this now gives you the ability to have a quality single point sling on your gun without having to take, like for example, if you're a cop and they've issued you a rifle and it doesn't have the quick detach right here, but you want to have a single point sling. Okay, then paracord sling allows you to have a single point sling that behaves identically to one hooked in here, but you don't have to take the weapon apart to modify it to put this in place. This is also great for those of you in the military who have been issued a rifle and you're told you cannot modify it. Well, this allows you to add a sling to it without any modification. And yes, a single point sling will control your weapon just fine. My advice to you, frankly, is 2-point sling, but single point sling works just fine too. When you're setting this up for righty versus lefty, pass the sling over the shoulder. The sling is going to come to you like this. The bungee is going to be center line. The sling is going to go left, under the armpit, back around. The majority of righties prefer to have their rifle shooting and then releasing to this side, so that when they go to their sidearm, the rifle is on this side out of their way. As a lefty, I actually like it here, because that way when I'm using the rifle and I allow it to go to the sling, I'm not actually allowing it to go to the sling before I go to my sidearm. I'm actually holding onto the weapon, grabbing my sidearm, the rifle goes down, the handgun comes up, and my support gear is here, and I don't want the rifle in the way. That's the way I run it. I'm weird, because I am left-handed, so whatever. But if you want to reverse this thing, all you have to do is unhook, let it go to your back, hold it here, pass it over, flip it over, right? And someone's like, bruh. Guys, it's that simple. It is that simple. So once again, taking it back, unhook, over the neck, grab it, hook. Guys, I used to go to SWAT conferences, and I'd demonstrate this stuff, and the operators would be like, I'm thinking, you guys ain't that bright, are you? And look, no magic tricks. It's still in the same orientation it was when I first started. It's a very simple equation, guys. And when you get them from me, they come like this. In fact, Ian Morris, this is your sling. It'll be heading out the door here shortly. Rubber band goes around, and then it goes in the package. And out the door it goes. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I wanted to show you guys how to make a single point pair sling, so you guys would understand that there's a lot that goes to this sling. There's a lot of testing, a lot of making of different versions of this to finally find this equation to finally find this equation that worked as perfectly as it does. And I've reproduced this sling so many times I've lost count of it. Droves of people have bought these slings. Even more have bought my 2-point slings because they realize the quality of a solid 2-point sling that does its job. The focus of a lot of products out on the market now are giving the customer an excessive amount of options, and it ends up causing more issues than it's worth. The 2-point Tier 1 Citizen sling is just such a simple sling. I love this thing. I've been working with it for years, and tactical use, precision use, gives you the tension that you need, and US made, guys, US made. And by the way, I'm the only person at Tier 1 Citizen, so if you send me a message, you guys know I respond each and every time, and my signature is at the bottom, and that actually is me responding. So please know that I'm the only one running this company, so I pay attention. So thank you for your support of Tier 1 Citizen. As always, God bless you all. Get those guns out in practice. Have a good one.